these kinds of things are the exact same type of intellectual dishonesty that you expect from the right. This is not something that I want to see on the left. This is not something that I want to see from liberals either. David A. Pacman doesn't know how to pronounce APAC in a hilarious attempt to feign ignorance. Yeah, I saw that. That's like kind of that's an insane thing that he did there. I'm gonna be honest. I do feel like a lot of the content creators like who I am very cordial with, who you know I have obvious disagreements with, but I'm like otherwise very cordial with regardless, have behaved in a way that I am kind of disappointed by. Not that it matters. I don't think these guys like me that much anyway, but you know, his brother worked for the ADL. No, I know I know he did, which is why it's like when I saw that, like when I saw that video where he like talks about APAC or IPAC, however you say it, I was like, come on, man, like what are you doing? Because it's a real like damned if you do, damned if you don't type situation for David Pacman, because it's like, you act like you don't know what APAC is. Okay. Like you act like you don't know what APAC is, then like either you're one, you know exactly what it is, but you're just like lying about not knowing what it is, or, which is again, disingenuous. Or two, you're a political commentator since like 2005 or something, and you don't know a very important lobbying group. Like, come on. Either way, it's just like a horrible, it just doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good at all. Like, that's crazy. You've been doing this for 20 years, man. What do you mean you don't know how to say APAC? It's crazy, weird way to play it from him. I know. I don't know why he's just like the thing is, for a lot of these guys, like here's one thing I will say. Okay. I have personal opinions and I openly state what my personal opinions are. And yet there are so many instances where a lot of people either punish me for openly stating my personal opinions and yelling at me over it, while simultaneously assuming that like I'm actually cynically advocating for the things that I'm advocating for, and I'm not being 100% transparent or honest. If that was the case, I would never talk about NATO, for example. Or if that was the case, I wouldn't be consistently duking it out with like my left flank when it comes to certain issues. I have red lines that I don't cross. Okay? The reason why I do this is because I think it's the most appropriate way to go about it. You have your opinions, you share them, you have your biases, you openly reveal those biases. And at the end of the day, if people appreciate your commentary, if people know where you're coming from and they agree with your statements, then that's great. Okay. If they don't, then they don't. It is what it is. You can't win it all. This kind of this kind of attitude, I think, kind of like this kind of attitude almost shelters the public from your perspective in a way that doesn't make any sense because you're a political commentator. Okay, it's just like it doesn't make any sense. Like why just you know what APAC is, man? That's crazy.
In the first 48 hours, took the Wired story and expanded it with even more outrageous claims, suggesting that it's APAC or IPAC. I don't even know how it's pronounced. APAC, IPAC.
Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. You know how to pronounce it, man. Come on. I guess like people also were yelling, I'll defend David on the Chorus Wired article, but pretending to not know APAC's a bad look. Like, does he think we're dumb enough to not know he knows what APAC, to not know that he knows what APAC is? It is one of the most well-known, powerful lobbying groups in the US and has been talked about plenty in the last decade. To pretend that he doesn't know what APAC, pretending it could be pronounced IPAC, is just insulting to anyone who follows this channel. All these years we defend this dude against APAC affiliation accusations, and he insults us by pretending not know how to pronounce it. Like, I don't think David Pacman is like funded by APAC, for the record. I've never stated that. I don't think that that is the case. But obviously, like, this is an area where he is heavily biased, right? Israel is an area where he is heavily biased. That bias both stems from his own personal opinions about the state of Israel, but it also stems from his personal opinions when it comes to American foreign policy. Like David, regardless of his socially progressive attitude, for years and years has had a lot of differences of opinion from someone like myself when it comes to American foreign policy. And he lands on the side that almost always is on the side of the United States, that rehashes and repeats whatever the State Department line is on a particular matter. Okay, so there's multiple reasons. He responds and says, guys, give me a break. I'm not pretending to not know what APAC is. I'm just unsure on the pronunciation. It's the same as how I get mixed up with the first O in sorrow is pronounced, or how the first A in Lara is pronounced. I mean, I don't know about all that. I think that's, it just like, it feels as though he was just saying that to be like, I don't know, what is this APAC thing? And of course, there are a ton of videos where he's saying APAC correctly. Like, I mean, that's...
things. Number one, APAC is a more right-wing group, and Jews in the U.S. are very, very liberal. So yeah, there are Jews who support APAC, who vote in the United States. But look at evangelical Christian support of APAC and of Israel. That doesn't even seem to be mentioned here. It's an important fact.
Like, he is a lot more knowledgeable on this issue than he lets on, is what I mean. Of course he is. He's been doing this for 20 plus years, man. Like, he is a very knowledgeable guy. And the Christian Zionist pro-Israel, the Christian Zionist pro-Israel contingency is a very real one. It's one that I talk about quite a bit. It's one that I talk about quite frequently. He is a very smart guy. Like, he's a very smart guy. He's the notion that he's like oblivious to how APAC is stated is a way to just like make it seem as though he's like, he has this like dedicated blind side to this issue, where I don't think that's the case. I think he just doesn't want to say what his opinions are on this.
Factor. But then we get to the bigger picture. You can recognize that this is playing on longtime anti-Semitic tropes and still support boycotting Israel, for example. And the reflexive reaction I saw from many on the left to say this can't be anti-Semitic because they felt as though it would in some way invalidate their support of boycotting Israel or their opposition to Benjamin Netanyahu. Separate the two things. You can be an opponent of Benjamin Netanyahu and believe that Ilhan Omar here is knowingly or unknowingly playing up anti-Semitic tropes. You can be for...
I'm so glad that I stood in opposition to this kind of stuff when Ilhan Omar was on the right side of history and was absolutely correct and was getting blasted by both the Democrats and the Republicans. This is when... Remember that Donald Trump clip that I play all the time? May Allah awaken the people to the evil doings of Israel and the United States of America. That's Donald Trump quoting Ilhan Omar. That's when people were basically like ripping into Ilhan Omar for saying that way long time ago. Okay, that is Donald Trump doing, because there's a point in time when like Donald Trump would go up on rallies and put Ilhan Omar's face on the TV in all of these stadiums, in all these arenas where they were actively trying to get her assassinated. Okay. Wait, that clip is not AI? No, that clip is real. You guys are so funny. You didn't know that? The May Allah awaken, here, send it to me. Send me that clip. The May Allah awaken the people to the evil doings of Israel and the United States of America. That clip right there is a real clip. Here.
Is an America hating socialist.
Look.
Yeah, Congresswoman Omar is an America-hating socialist. She minimized the September 11th attack on our homeland.
Yeah, it's a clip chimp. For those of you who don't know, like he talks about like all of these like idiotic, which by the way, you might have noticed a very interesting line of attack here. Whenever someone is a Muslim, okay, and they're like anti-American imperialism, it doesn't take much for people to immediately go, you love 9/11, you minimized it, you actually want more 9/11 to take place. Yeah, I mean, here's my video on this from 6 years ago. Pathetic Democrats won't defend Ilhan Omar again. What the f? I'm just like driving around. I was a car guy. It's a car ramp, boys. But yeah.
Where far more than 3,000 people died, saying... some people did something. Big deal. Some people did something. She pleaded for compassion for ISIS recruits right here in Minnesota.
It's also bullshit. Like all of this stuff is like classic bullshit. You're just leaning on tropes.
Omar laughed that Americans speak of Al-Qaeda. You remember that tape? Speak of Al-Qaeda. But when we say something about the United States, you just don't say America with any intensity. Remember that? Representative Omar has a history of launching virulent anti-Semitic screeds, whether you like it or not. She said the U.S. support for Israel is all about the Benjamins. She said that pro-Israel.
You know what's funny? If you were to run this clip again, every single person in that crowd, or not every single person, but like most people in that crowd would be in agreement with Ilhan Omar. They would go, oh my God, that's crazy. Look at how based Ilhan Omar was. Why the f did we hate her? Okay. And for the record, the notion that like it's all about the Benjamins is anti-Semitic was another completely insane media cycle. God damn, we've gone through so much. It is crazy. People in the United States of America love punishing those who are bold and are on the right side for just simply being on the right side, for simply demonstrating the moral courage to say the most basic shit.
Israel lawmakers have an allegiance to a foreign country. Omar wrote that Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them to see the evil doings of Israel and the United States.
Yeah, this is from, this is a classic faucet that you see. A classic, like, unlimited faucet where when someone is obviously Muslim, it works a lot better. They tried to do that with Bernie Sanders too, but Bernie Sanders is Jewish, so it didn't work. When you are a visibly Muslim person, you're hijabi, you're black, you're a Somali refugee as well. Like, obviously, it is significantly more impactful. You and Noah talked about this moment, consistent.
No, I mean, it's just like to address the first part of this, because this is like now a multi-stage controversy. To address the first part of it, like what she said was not anti-Semitic. It is a stretch to call it anti-Semitic. It's a real stretch.
Yeah. February 13th, 2019. Liberals are caving to the right once again. I still got the same day one homies. We're still saying the same exact, which is why it's so funny. It's so funny when people try to act as though I have changed. Okay? What the hell are we talking about? I've changed. You've changed. You just didn't listen to the things that I was saying back then. It's so ridiculous. It is so ridiculous that these motherfuckers try to be like, oh, Hasan, you've changed your mind. It's like, bro, there is not someone that is more consistent out there. How is calligraphy Jews, Benjamins, not anti-Semitic? What does that even mean? Calligraphy Jews? No, when she says it's all about the Benjamins, she's talking about money. She's talking about the pervasive influence of money and lobbying on American Congress, which is ironic because we're about to talk about that right here.
I think that the canard of like a Jewish conspiracy and Jewish financiers controlling the world, controlling and ruling the world, like Protocols of the Elders of Zion stuff, like that's totally that like as a canard and as a trope, it exists. It's like it's a noxious myth and it is a long and like sordid lineage or whatever. But what Ilhan Omar did was actually use the word APAC to describe like the term APAC, which is not a Jewish organization. It's not a Jewish organization. She didn't say Jews. She didn't say any of the things that would have identified this as, like an anti-Semitic remark. She talks about APAC and she says that they spend money to, in the case that she was referring to, that APAC and organizations like it spend money to support Republicans in Congress, and that the incentive and the reasons for Kevin McCarthy to say that Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar are, you know, anti-Semitic is because that's what the donors and the people who are part of the Israel lobby want. Because
I'm gonna be honest, I'm so proud of my friends. I'm so proud of this community. I mean, we've been at this battle for so goddamn long. This is also part of the reason why we're like when people are like chirping at me because they feel as though like my support for Palestine and Palestinians is like conditional or something. It's like, yeah, whatever, dude. I'll let that wash away. It's all good. You know what I mean? There's never like I have never ever stood down from this position ever in my freaking life. Okay, there was a chatter in here who said, by the way, look at the top dono is BDS. Clips like this only remind me how confused I was after October 7th when a bunch of chatters acted like you changed your positions. I couldn't figure out if we'd been watching the same streams. Yeah, no, it's just people weren't paying attention to it. Like I think people just basically drop certain issues. Like there are a lot of people who were who had been oblivious to the way Israel behaves, and I guess they like completely tuned out when I was talking about this issue for years and years and years, right? How do we arrive at this? Because we were talking about Ilhan Omar, because here's an older video of David Pacman saying APAC correctly in the process of also shitting on Ilhan Omar.
Or against boycotting Israel or Israeli companies or whatever, and still recognize that it's a really bad idea to even go near approximating these anti-Semitic tropes. It's bad for Democrats. It's bad for the progressive movement. It's bad for those who want reform in Israel. That's okay. You don't have to feel as though merely admitting that this was a mistake, that it was either ignorant or malicious, and both are problematic. And that doesn't change the validity of your perspective on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or what policy should be towards Israel. And I was concerned before the election that exactly this type of nonsense would start flying after the midterms.
Yeah, it's just like this is in the process of like criticizing Ilhan Omar
from APAC. APAC support APAC.
Yeah, so he knows how to say APAC, man. That's crazy. Did anyone actually claim APAC was funding Chorus? No, and also, I think there's a problem with this. There's a problem with what's going on here, with the way that people are actually tackling the Chorus situation. And I think it's like something that a lot of people say I do whenever I get criticized, right? I try to, first and foremost, tackle the major issue whenever I get like hit from my left flank about whatever particular matter that there is disagreement over. In the process, I also do talk about like some of the most edge cases and some of the most insane smears that I am receiving, right? Yeah, I mean, David Pacman's brother, who worked as a producer, was a regional director for the ADL. Of course, yeah, he did. I mean, he knows how to say APAC. Anyway, that doesn't matter. His brother's involvement doesn't matter. My point is, I feel like this is, it's a way to try and escape the criticism that I think is valid, as far as like saying, look, this is being funded by the 1630 fund. There's a lot of misinformation flying around. There is a lot of misinformation flying around about this stuff, and I'm going to address every single one. But as far as like getting funded by like a dark money, a dark money PAC like a 1630, and as far as like the contractual obligations goes, I think like it was a mistake to put forth contracts like this that are very heavily redlined. And that obviously editorial independence is incredibly important, right? Editorial independence is obviously very important for independent media, and we are going to be better than the Republicans on this issue, and therefore we should always disclose, regardless of whether the law wants us to disclose or not, in order to make sure that you understand, if you're a part of this audience, in order to make sure that you understand that, like, you know, there are people who are funding this process. If they were to do that and then move on, like, I wouldn't have as much issue. But there has been also misinformation surrounding this stuff, like people saying like, oh, these guys are funded by APAC or whatever. No, of course. Chorus is not funded by APAC. Here's another misinformation that I've seen. People talking about how 1630 Fund also funded RFK Jr. Yes, the reason why 1630 Fund funded RFK Jr. is not because they were aligned with RFK Jr. The reason why 1630 Fund funded RFK in his campaign was because they saw him as a spoiler. Okay. You know, I have seen a bunch of different like pieces of misinformation of people like criticizing 1630 and not doing the correct criticism. So when there's like incorrect criticism, I think these guys just kind of grab onto that and then simply use that as a jump off point to be like, well, we're not funded by APAC. I don't think this person is funded by APAC. Okay. I don't. I think that's ridiculous. If anything, it would be J Street and not APAC if someone were to be funded on the progressive side. And even then, I don't think this person is funded by J Street either. I think this is just David Pacman's own personal opinion on the matter, okay?
That is funding this show or other creators. Of course, not true. That the DNC is involved, not true. Some creators in the first 48 hours took...
Did Taylor actually accuse him of APAC funding? No, no one did. I think like people just went along with it because people just use APAC as like a catch-all for every type of like Israel lobby activity. It's wrong if you're going to be like super specific. But no, Taylor Lorenz never said that. The only thing that a lot of people noticed in the aftermath of reading this article was that a lot of these content creators, especially big ones, right, and even smaller ones, were all content creators that had like either aligned with the previous administration, or had been noticeably absent from the conversation when it comes to a major issue such as Israel's genocide of the Palestinians. And that is the reason why people were like, are these guys getting paid to be silent on Israel? And I tried to explain at that point where it's like, well, there is editorial control over this process, at least contractual obligations that require some semblance of editorial control, which I think is like not great. These guys mostly are self-selected. But the reason why people say David a Pacman or he's being funded by APAC or whatever is not because people legitimately think that APAC, a far-right pro-Israel lobbying group, is like directly funding him and his operations. The reason why they say that is because he's either A, noticeably absent from the conversation on Israel, or B, when he talks about Israel, it's usually in a way where it's fairly... I mean, it's just like a liberal Zionist position. That's it. That's the reason. Yeah, we no longer take APAC money, says U.S. Rep. Morgan McGarvey at a town hall in Louisville, Saturday. The group previously backed McGarvey in 2022 and 2024 elections. This shows progress of sorts, but if APAC is just replaced by DMFI or the dozen other pro-Israel groups vaguely aligned with the Democrats, then this risks becoming a box to be checked without substantive change in incentives or more meaningfully political outcomes. Exactly. I do think that I do think that it's like kind of silly to make it seem like you don't have any knowledge of this pivotal. You don't have any knowledge of this incredibly important lobbying group in American politics, especially right now, more than ever before. More important than ever before, I would say, when it's top of mind. Yeah, I saw the Matt Lee brief. That was pretty funny, where he said, squinting as my wife shows me the credit card statement, $15 a month for only funds? Fangs? What even is this? That's a good meme. That's a good joke. I mean, it just gets right in heart. I don't get why so many liberal pundits don't seem to understand the majority views of their own candidates. I think the reason why a lot of people just like choose to be silent on this conversation is because they are they're in a bubble. They're afraid of cutting through. They're afraid of exhibiting any sort of bravery, any sort of moral consistency. They're just like by the way that this like job works. When you're in Congress for an extended period of time, you are entirely sheltered from the public opinion. And the only time someone is reflecting on what the public opinion is when you're on a phone call with like a pro-Israel lobbyist guy who's telling you the public opinion is pro-Israel. Okay, that's it. Some people are cynical. They recognize what the truth is and they choose not to hammer on. Some people are oblivious because they're bubbled in. It doesn't matter. The outcome is still the same. But we're talking about politicians. If you're talking about like someone like David Pacman, I think he knows. He knows what's going on. That's the reason why he's silent on the issue, right? Because if he felt like there was a lever here that he could pull, if he felt like there was an angle here that he could take, that still maintained like some semblance of a pro-Israel position as a progressive pundit, then he would do it. It's just he's choosing to keep quiet because he doesn't want to say something that would reflect poorly on him and his commentary, especially right now, because people will go, what the you are saying you're pro-Israel? This is crazy. At a time like this, when Israel's doing a genocide, why aren't you saying Israel's doing a genocide? Like that would be the argument from his own audience, and he doesn't want to deal with that, I think, which is why he just like chooses to stay silent on the issue. It's not that he's oblivious to what's going on, and I say this like the reality of the matter is like if he had an opinion that he wasn't worried about, if he had an opinion that he wasn't so worried about, like he would say it. He would say it out loud. He'd be like, Israel's doing a genocide. It's unimaginable. It's really up. And also we have to put a stop to it. You know, we have to put a stop to it. We have to put an end to it. It's just plausible deniability. It's a way to create plausible deniability. There's a new Verge article that came out from Tina Nguyen, how the Democrats keep copying the MAGA influencer playbook and failing. Which is an update on or a complimentary piece of the Taylor Lorenz piece. As the fallout of the Chorus influencer program reveals, the Democratic establishment seems how the f do you say that? Sclerotically, I've never read that word before in my entire life. Sclerotically incapable of existing in a media environment it cannot control. I got it. Sclerotically. That is crazy. Reading comprehension at all-time lows. Yeah, no, that's English is my second language. Some of these words are insane to pronounce, okay? Do you want to know how that would be pronounced? Tina Nguyen wrote, as a senior reporter for The Verge, wrote this article about the chorus and updates on the chorus, specifically the story that has evolved away from chorus getting funded from the 1630 fund all the way down to the way that some of the chorus content creators have like responded. Recently, Wired published an article revealing the existence of a secret Democrat influencer incubator that trained liberal and progressive content creators to push coordinated messaging across their shared social media platforms and paid them handsomely to do so. The fallout has been chaotic, at least in the left-wing influencer world. Creators are shanking their rivals for participating in the program, and paid influencers are trying to defend themselves for taking the money. But the controversy around the Chorus Creator Incubator program stems from the fact that it was so secret, participants had to sign contracts that gave Chorus control over their interview bookings, limit what they said about other creators, and non-approved political figures, and were forbidden from even acknowledging that they were a part of the program. In response, Chorus, a group funded by 1630 Fund, a liberal 501c4 that's often drawn comparisons to the Libertarian Koch network and often outspends them, has stated that it was trying to organize left-wing influencers to match their counterparts in MAGA world. In a statement to The Verge, Chorus founder Brian Tyler Cohen defended the program and said the program has achieved hundreds of new applicants since the Wired story received. I'm incredibly proud that Chorus has received financial support from over 1,000 individuals who recognize that there's a desperate need for more pro-democracy voices in the online space. They want to fund a bunch of diverse creators to do this full-time who wouldn't be able to pay their bills otherwise and we're incredibly grateful. After the regulator newsletter was sent to subscribers on Tuesday, the 1630 Fund sent a second statement from President Amy Kurtz disputing Wired's claims about the restrictions Chorus placed on creators over guests, content, and disclosing their participation in the program. So what's interesting about this is that they keep saying this is not real, but in every single instance where they've tried to talk about the debunking, where creators that participate in the program have tried to like say that this article is actually false, they openly reveal that there is no dispute in the reporting whatsoever. My longtime readers will know this about me, but if you discover me through The Verge, I should probably give you a little context. Last year, I published a memoir called The MAGA Diaries, which goes a bit into how I got ensnared in right-wing activism in my early 20s, specifically how I got lured into the right-wing media career pipeline as a college student seeking journalism internship in 2008, placed by my program mentor in a post-grad job at Tucker Carlson's Daily Caller in 2011, and then was nearly sent to Wisconsin to work at a fake newspaper funded by dark money that wanted to undermine the teachers' union protests, all under the guise of credentialing a journalism fellow to write hit pieces on them. Instead, I quit the journalism network on the spot, yeeted myself out of Washington, and began a magazine writing career in New York, so I'd never have to deal with the conservative movement ever again. Unfortunately, the arc of history had other plans. The Chorus influencer program, in many ways, by the way, you don't think this is like a interesting article to read? Like you are in here, you're in here right now, which means that you are invested in like political media and how political media is created. I mean, this is a profoundly important aspect of political media, both on the independent side and also on the mainstream side as well. Dark money funding is a major part of political media. And it's not like liberals either. This is not just about liberals. This is like a consistent and pervasive issue in every aspect of your lives. In every type of like political content that you consume, there could potentially be some secretive organizations that are taking advantage of the lack of transparency and funding that are funding some of these movements. And it happens all the time on the right, all the time, with regular frequency. The Chorus Influencer Program, in many ways, is a dem-coded version of the right-wing journalism summer camp that I attended during my sophomore year of college. But let me back it up a bit. I thought I had received a paid summer internship in journalism for liberty-loving students, funded through the Institute of Humane Studies at George Mason University, which promised to get me hired at a non-right-wing place like MSNBC. Seriously, the program advertisement said alumni got placed at MSNBC. The generous internship stipend was contingent on me going to a week-long journalism seminar and assisting in research about the Founding Fathers' views on state-funded education. But looking back on it over a decade later, it was actually a training camp on how to be a proper libertarian thought leader. There were a lot of lectures about liberal media bias, breakout discussion groups on whether Obamacare was an overreach of federal powers, and tips on how to write a resume for when applying for jobs. And of course, no one in my cohort got a job at MSNBC. Dozens of other right-wing journalism talent incubators exist inside the conservative movement, some of which have been around for decades and are constantly learning how to leverage new technology for political gain. I'll give you a great example of this. David Horowitz is a massive piece of shit, former trot turned into a neocon, turned into a monstrous piece who is a major Islamophobe. He died recently. Rest in peace to David Horowitz. David Horowitz is responsible for Candace Owens, for example. These guys pluck talent early on from the independent media sphere and basically elevate them to prominent mainstream figures. David Horowitz and Ben Shapiro played a formative role in legitimizing and making Candace Owens a major political figure in the American conservative movement. Okay? Think about that. Both of these guys are entirely invested in being as pro-Israel as possible and maximum Islamophobia. And yet Candace Owens not only was anti-Semitic on her rise to power, but she was also pro-Israel until, you know, the tide shift took place and she became openly anti-Israel while also being anti-Semitic. And that was a bridge too far for Ben Shapiro, and they had a falling out. Now she has still a fairly robust independent media career. But she got her start from these guys, the right-wing version of what we're talking about, the one that is like most pervasive, the one that has always existed. Over the years, other boot camps and programs have opened up for aspiring social media influencers, live streamers, and the like. I recently learned at the Leadership Institute, a group that's been turning young college Republicans into powerful elected officials since the 1970s, just launched a conservative podcasting school. But ask any right-wing influencer if they've gone to some training camp. Hell, ask them in public, and not only will they quickly say yes, they'll also tell you what program they enrolled in. The reason why we know about David Horowitz, for example, is for this reason. Because these guys are proud of these programs. These guys are proud of them. They are like, yeah, this is our bias. This is our political movement. Not only will they quickly say yes, they'll also tell you what program they enrolled in, who they took classes with, and what they taught of their coursework. They might even be proud of getting into some elite program or getting accepted into a certain seminar. But one can't simply copy the right-wing formula and paste it on the left. The famous Andrew Breitbart saying politics is downstream from culture isn't just an observation, but an organizational principle on the right. If you can use culture to change people's values, then you can then get them to vote a certain way. There's a lot to be said about the right's attempts to drive culture forward or backwards, but they were far better at manipulating and taking over where it existed on the internet, or in most cases, ceding control and ridding the wave of the internet entirely, so long as they ended up in power. On the internet, it helps to be shameless. Either way, MAGA influencers have the ability to define what is and is not culture because their followers want to follow a culture warrior, damn it. Why do you think they try to make everything about what is and what is not woke? In contrast, I'm hardly surprised that Chorus and the 1630 Fund went to these lengths to restrict what these creators could say. The octogenarians of the Democrat establishment and the rising young leaders who remind said octogenarians of themselves seem sclerotically incapable of existing in a media environment they cannot control. The culture is no longer run by the blue donors in Hollywood and New York. After all, its last president, Joe Biden, had an extremely hostile relationship with reporters and celebrities asking too many questions about his age. And his last presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, was so allergic to appear on popular podcasts that she would only do so if the host flew to her and conducted the interview on a set completely controlled by the campaign. She reportedly refused to appear on the Joe Rogan Experience if they had to go to the host Texas studio, and reportedly shelled out 6 figures to build a DC-based Call Her Daddy set for her interview with Alex Cooper, who records her podcast in California. That interview got like what? Not even a fraction of the views that the Joe Rogan Experience got with Donald Trump. There are obviously other issues here as well. Kamala Harris's incapability of coming across as authentic in a long conversation was going to be a major hurdle. Kamala Harris's inability to recognize that People wanted more from her, that they wanted her to represent a change from the Joe Biden administration, and her refusal to recognize that or even say things in line with that was another major hurdle as well. So obviously there were other issues as to why she couldn't do these sorts of podcasts, and why Donald Trump is a uniquely telegenic figure who can do these sorts of podcasts as opposed to people like Kamala Harris. But this was a flaw. Though they've tried to avoid being described as a liberal copycat, the 1630 Fund has been compared to the Koch network, the secretive group right-wing billionaires that created, among other things, this right-wing media training camp that the fund is trying to counter. We reject any notion that the right wing has been more transparent in this area. STF takes great pride in supporting critically important causes, Kurtz said in her statement to The Verge. As a Koch alumni via technicality, I think they're pretty dang similar, even if they're somewhat faster to fess up to their involvement. Between 2009 and 2016, the Koch network was unparalleled in funding the rise of the Tea Party. This is true. The Koch brothers created the Tea Party and the Freedom Caucus that came out of that movement. As I've said over and over again, these are like dark money influence in American politics is not just quid pro quo. You go in, you just fucking say, hey, this is the bill that we wrote for you. You better pass this shit and we'll give you money and you'll win your election over year over year. That's not just the only aspect of dark money funding in these operations. There's a pervasive influence peddling operation that exists as well. A lot of you, for the first time ever, started recognizing this for like APAC, for example. But APAC is the tip of the iceberg for one issue, for Israel. There are a million other groups like this, most of them like ALEC, all these think tanks like Heritage Foundation, American Enterprise Institute, all these places that create subsidiary funds, that create umbrella organizations, that try to shelter who the donors are, the oil lobby in and of itself, the Wilkes brothers, the Koch brothers, like they exist in every aspect of not just like the legislative agenda, but they exist in every aspect of media manipulation as well. Okay? There are people that are going and working at think tanks like the Manhattan Institute. You might know Christopher Rufo, if you recall, Mr. CRT, Mr. Anti-Woke. And they sit around and they try to find new things to get people pissed off about. New fake shit to get people pissed off about. And they get paid handsomely to do this. And then they take these talking points, they create controversy, and they pump these talking points into this network of influencers. Okay? And there is massive horizontal and vertical integration on the right-wing media ecosystem, as I've described over and over again. This is something that I'm very knowledgeable on because this is the industry that I'm in. This is something that I have seen throughout my personal political development, my own personal professional media career. The candidate selection, the digital media apparatus, the voter turnout machine, etc., to the point that the American political right briefly exists as this cadre of wealthy libertarian billionaires envision it. Limited government, open borders, free trade, not too racist. Then Donald Trump found Twitter, got elected president twice. The MAGA influences overrode the think tank people and media training camp grads. Even though the Koch network still technically exists, free market libertarianism died in America. Republican voters may not have liked Trump back then, but they preferred his brand over a bunch of old billionaires trying to redefine what Republican meant. And now those billionaires are getting absolutely reamed by Trump's tariffs. So yeah, I think it's a very apt comparison. Mia Sato covers influencers and the power of their parasocial relationships for The Verge, which is the massive other half of the story, and we go more into that below the fold. But before that, here's some of The Verge's latest stories about the regulator world. All right, skipping that. I can rant about the Democrats until the cows come home, but ultimately the point of course was to mobilize these influencers' followers, and that is a very, very new form of what a poli-sci major might call community outreach. After angrily sending Slack messages to each other about it for a full Friday afternoon, we realized that we should probably enjoy our Labor Day weekend and then have a more fulsome, less rage-driven conversation about whether internet communities care about political SpawnCon. The rest is just like back and forth about whether the liberal audiences give a shit about SpawnCon, especially political SpawnCon, sponsored content or not, it seems. There are a bunch of different industries that are colliding here. The influencer industry, the media, journalism specifically, and politics. And each of those industries has its own set of norms and practices and expectations. Many of the influencers at the center of the saga have built platforms by blurring these lines. Are they reporters regurgitating news and offering analysis? Are they content creators who happen to talk about politics and policy? Or are they messages for a political party, an extension of the Democratic Party messaging and voter activation? What's unique about this and what is stoking some of the discontent and disagreement is that a lot of people don't see the issue with these creators taking money from politically aligned groups. I do. That's my own personal flaw, I guess, but I do. I don't think it's appropriate to get money from political advocacy organizations in general. But if you are getting money from a political advocacy organization that you are aligned with politically, you should openly state it. And I have said this time and time again. I said this when we were talking about the Tenet stuff with Tim Pool. I've said this before over and over again. I've had opportunities where political advocacy groups have tried to give me money to do interviews and stuff, and I've refused to take money from them. I've been transparent about that as well, and have said no, because I'm the one who funds these organizations, not the other way around. The interview that I conducted with the immigrant rights advocacy group is a great example of this. Okay, in the simplest terms, if you are a political content creator, your output is your product. Okay, that's your whole product. Like, it just doesn't make any sense that you would dilute that with outside influence. It doesn't make any sense. Does that make sense? Like, it doesn't. It makes no sense whatsoever to be like, yeah, I'm just gonna get money from an organization that is going to play a role in my advocacy. Like partnering with a liberal brand to advance liberal causes. The right does this, so we should too, is the thinking. I'm sympathetic to this argument, honestly. But the actions of the creators in the group that has been brokering these dark money payments makes no sense if there's really nothing to hide. If this is something that Dems need to do to keep up with the current state of politics, why not publicly say they're doing it to fight Trumpism? This is my point. This is exactly how I feel about this. If they were to come out and be like, yo, my B, it is strange that we had these like contractual obligations. We're fixing that. Okay. And this is a beautiful thing. This is this is out in the open. This is a cool thing that we're doing to combat the Republican Party. Then great. Sure. Okay. I still don't think it's the best thing to do, which is to get money for, if you're a political commentator or an influencer, to get money to say political shit. But if the contract was either less restrictive or they refused to do the red lines that some of these influencers obviously took issue with in terms of editorial control, then there wouldn't be something that is like as newsworthy, right? But instead of doing that, these guys just went along with it and said, no, actually, Trump is doing this, so we got to do it as well. Fine. Okay. Don't disagree with that. And also, the journalist who's doing this is actually secretly MAGA and a litany of other different things, like saying that the article is debunked without actually debunking anything. Like an article that has 0 retractions in it, by the way, confusing what a retraction is with an update when you actually finally get a quote from the organization. Like these kinds of things are the exact same type of intellectual dishonesty that you expect from the right. This is not something that I want to see on the left. This is not something that I want to see from liberals either. Okay? When I say fight fire with fire or liberals have to become more like Republicans, I don't mean like literally become a bunch of different like blue Charlie Kirks or a liberal Prager U network. I mean like they need to be more aggressive, bold, and refuse to compromise on some of these like stances they take on the humanity of migrants, for example. No Republican ever goes, let's get bipartisanship going. They don't do that. Okay? They don't do that at all. They say every immigrant's a racist and we have to jail all of them and deport all of them. Why can't progressive people, liberal and leftist alike, say the exact same, but in the direction of the truth, where you say, no, they're not actually. They should just get the proper documentation because they've been living here and working as a part of this economy and are important parts of these neighborhoods and these communities for decades now, and they are just as American as you are. Give them the fucking paperwork. Push for amnesty. That's what the messaging platform is supposed to look like. It almost feels like people are less upset about these undisclosed partnerships than they are about like undisclosed makeup or a text con or something. People being the progressive influencer community or their followers. Though the funny thing is, the moment I asked that, I immediately thought about the double standard of the MAGA influencer community and their following. It's pretty much a given that MAGA influencers are the product of donor grants, training camps, academic programs, etc. And not only do their followers accept that, they find it absolutely necessary for the promotion of their cause, mainly because they think all the general cultural institutions that shape politics like the mainstream media are captured by the libs. So any sort of organizational advantage that the right can throw together, no matter how it's funded, gives them an advantage in the culture wars. People being the followers. And yeah, I think there's actually a demand from liberals that the Democrats figure out their own version of this, which is why it's sort of bizarre to me that this program was hush-hush, that they didn't want creators to talk about specifics of it. A lot of followers don't care and are actually happy that their fave liberal influencers are getting paid. So it looks to me like Chorus in 1630 took a bit too much inspiration for the early... Dude, this is identical to my commentary, by the way. I said this exact same thing. When I saw this... When I saw the contract and the contractual obligations and like the way that it's designed... if you recall, I said immediately, I was like, this looks almost like a carbon copy of like a Koch funded media network. Like they almost looked at like the Koch method and just slapped it on, but with like a liberal patina. And it does come across in the exact same way, which was notoriously secretive and really did not like people tracking exactly where its money went. Media, ground game, etc. The New Yorker's Jane Meyer. Jane Meyer is the journalist for this, by the way. Dark money funding and dark money networks. Jane Meyer from the New Yorker once reported that they would run white noise machines during their closed door meetings to prevent people from listening. There's an entire freaking chapter in my memoir where I learned that a bunch of the postgrad journalism jobs I applied for were connected in some bizarre secret way to Koch-funded entities. The Koch network was effective, but only what it was designed for, which was to pump money into the Tea Party to make it appear as if it were actually grassroots libertarian organization. This is why I always say the Tea Party movement was not a grassroots movement. It was an AstroTurf movement. It was more complex than just like simply paying people to go and stand outside of a protest with placards or whatever. There was an organic initiative to get people out, and that organic initiative actually worked. That organic initiative unironically led to Donald Trump, by the way. The Tea Party culture warriors unironically led to, one, Sarah Palin, which was disastrous and played a formative role in the John McCain ticket falling apart. And then it led to Donald Trump. These guys thought they could just keep pumping their base, some of the most reactionary elements of their base, with like insane radical propositions. And they thought it would not turn into a major problem down the line for themselves, which it did. The Koch network was completely incapable of stopping Trump in 2016. And every time it tried to stand up against Trumpism or reinsert small government back into the GOP's core party values or whatever, it just didn't. This is what liberals are afraid of, for the record. This is the reason why I think if they were to do a Koch-style woke media influencing operation, they would be very careful not to allow any sort of radical elements within the base of the party, radical elements such as a demand for Medicare for all, to actually fly, okay? This is where the editorial control kicks in. This is where the editorial independence becomes an issue. I truly think that it had to do with the fact that Americans overall were pissed off at the bunch of the idea of a bunch of rich people trying to hide behind a bunch of ostensibly grassroots organizations, whereas other groups like Turning Point USA would come in with their influencer affiliate program, be pretty open about who they were funded by and what they did, and everyone's like, okay, sure, we're chill with it. To me, it seems like 1630 Fund is still in the part one of the Koch arc, that they have to pretend that their movement is actually grassroots and not something that's turbocharged with donor money. What's interesting is that a lot of the creators do seem to have started from a grassroots place. It makes sense that the Dem establishment would want to tap into that, but the execution has been so painfully messy. How much do you think the brand matters here? Like, is it a situation where the audience will accept someone who's like progressive or left-leaning, but then react negatively to anyone that's associated with the official Democratic Party establishment, i.e. anything Biden-Harris coded, gave money to Israel coded? I think there's some of that, but the biggest frustration, where there is any, seems to be about the lack of transparency. I feel like if there was a DSA adjacent group doing this, people would also be mad. So I've covered my share of MAGA influencer civil wars for, 10 years. And on the surface, they're kind of similar. So-and-so is taking money from this guy secretly, but clearly MAGA hasn't suffered from it. This is the first time the Democrats have had actual community internet drama. Tell me if I'm being totally cynical, or are the Dems actually handling this meltdown worse than like any corporation caught in a SpawnCon scandal? I do think the damage control is a little bit clumsy. I think it looks bad to have none of the content creators respond to the Wired pre-publication. So yeah, they didn't say anything. They didn't, because when you write an article like this, you literally go to these people, David Pacman, some of the most like famous Chorus affiliates. You go to them. You go to Chorus itself. You go to 1630 Fund. None of them actually responded at all to the pre-publication questions, only to then launch a faucet, a barrage of like misinformation in some respects under the auspices of like correcting the record. That didn't necessarily like even attack Wired magazine for its publication, but instead directly attacked the journalist. Nothing to see here. Why not say that to the Wire? Why not say that to Wire from the jump? And if the defense is that Chorus doesn't let influencers talk to the media, well, that's weird too. I don't know how long this will live on, though. People only have so much bandwidth to be mad about this. And if there's one thing that's certain about influencer culture, I don't think people are mad about this. I think liberals don't give a shit. I think a lot of liberals, there might be some leftists that are, a little disturbed by this. But overall, by and large, I think a lot of the independent media content creators and their audiences are totally on board with this. They think it's awesome. They think it's great. They see this as a fight. They see this as a real fight. that the liberals are finally pushing back, fighting fire with fire. Of course, there is a broader issue that I have with this beyond the transparency, the lack of transparency, or beyond like what kind of messaging seminars are taking place. My issue, of course, would be if the unlimited faucet of mainstream media was utterly incapable of making the Democrats come across more appealing to the masses, why the influencer network also do that if the Democrats themselves don't change their policies? This is an issue at the heart of the Democratic Party, okay? You'll never guess who the DOJ attorney leading the Harvard anti-Semitism case is a big fan of. DOJ lawyer waging war against Harvard sure seems to like Hitler. That's, wow, how unexpected. I feel like in this current media landscape, this is seen as like a benefit for the right, for the record. They're like, oh, he's a real one. He ain't phony. That's how you know he'll really go after the anti-Semites.